in progress.
Of Shabbos Parshas Chazon, Tafshin Tes Vov. It begins with the famous words of ציון במשפט תפדה, ושבי, בצדקה. We were talking about, we started off with the idea of 3 stages in davening. There's a level of moida ani lefanecha, the level of hayda, where you accept and admit to Hashem's perspective that the world is ayin and the true yesh is above. And then from that level, you're supposed to reach to the level of baracha. Baracha is in Shemoneh Esrei, where you have all the brachas over there, which is about hamshacha and revealing that. That's not just in the way of hida'ah, not just in the way of acceptance and admitting. And in between, the connector between the two is the level of ahava, the level of hafta, the level of midas. And the Rebbe also spoke about in Sfiris, it's the same thing. Malchus is haidah. You have to reach all the way up to bracha, which is bina, also having to do with keser. Meya bracha is b'chol yom. The intermediary between them is the level of midas, the level of ahava that connects and brings about that from haidah one should get to the level of bracha. Now the Rebbe is going to continue on the 4th page of the Maimer, page 235, is Daled. That is the normal, regular way that when a person follows that step-by-step process, so then the neshama arises to a higher level than it was before. Because we say, neshama shnesat b'tahayda, and then we conclude, calls man that the whole idea is to reach the haidah, to the level of bracha. That's going to bring it even higher than the level of tahira, even higher than the level of the tehiru ilah that we spoke about. Is the level of tahira, the supernal purity, the level that's beyond seder ishtalshlus. Now the level of oirin sof. Now he's going to continue. So what happens with a level that is not the way it's supposed to be? It's not ideal, etc. So in Ois Daled he begins, all of this is the aliyah that follows the yerida of the neshama and the guf, when everything follows and clicks and does the way it's supposed to be doing and following the directions. But if it's not that way, if the person is not following along the appropriate path, concerning this it says, ציון במשפט תפדה, ושבי, בצדקה. You will redeem ציon with mishpat and the returnees with tzedakah. The idea behind this is the ציון who lashon siman. The expression, the word ציon is from the word sign. A sign indicates that it's not the thing itself, it's completely bottled to whatever it is indicating. Like ציon means a mark. You would say a mark on a test would also be called a ציon. It's only a mark. The koyal etzem on neshama, the level of the neshama that we can be called that it's only a siman, only a sign, is the essence of the neshama. How come? Instead of the avodas that we were talking about up till now, the avodah of bittul and haidah, and then the level of a higher level of midas, and then even more so, and the level of bracha, but that's not still the essence. The essence is to be found specifically in the avodah of ציon. The avodah of the essence of the soul is in the will of the heart, that's beyond reason and beyond knowledge. That's the level of etzma neshama. This is the will, the core connection that the neshama has with the Eibishter that transcends intellect, transcends the meditation that brings him to Avos Hashem, etc., etc. We spoke before that the primary level of Ava, that's the link between Haidah and Bracha, is b'chol levavcha, b'chol nafshecha, that he understands that how Hashem is to be found in this world, and that's why he wants to connect with him, and so on. But that's still intellectual and rationally based, and that's the love that's b'chol levavcha, b'chol nafshecha. The level of the Re'usa Deliva, the level that's the Tziyun, the Etzem of the Neshama, V'hu inyan ha'aved b'chol meidecha. That's the aved that's with all your might. So the Rebbe explains about the level of the neshama that's called tzia. V'hinei mash etzma neshama nekras b'shem tzia in Lashon Siman. The fact that the essence of the soul is called tzia, and from the word sign, what does that mean? When you say that the neshama is a sign for something, it cannot be a sign for levels of elikus, of godliness, which are only lights and revelations. When you talk about a simon, we talk about a sign that's only on something that transcends it, that's higher than it. Just like physically, like we said before, you have a sign, it says on a sign, you're going to reach this and this town in 50 miles. So it has the name of the town over there. The sign on that town, or even the sign on a store indicating this is a shoe store, it has no significance. It's incomparable to the actual function of the store. It's only a sign. So therefore, if we're talking about the neshama, the essence of the neshama being a sign, it has to be a sign for something that is greater and greater to a powerful degree than the actual sign. Just like the store itself or the city itself is much greater than just the sign that says in a shoe store or Los Angeles or whatever. So therefore, you cannot say that the neshama is a sign, a tziyun, a simon for things that are only revelations of Hashem. Since the neshamas arose in Hashem's thought, they are higher, even the malachim. It's impossible to say that the neshamas are a sign on lights and revelations, on things that are revelations of godliness. Why? Because the neshamas are higher than levels of revelation. So therefore, the only thing we could talk about that the neshama, especially we're talking about the essence of the neshama, is a sign for Elim Siman Ala Atzmus. This is a sign for Hashem's very essence. What does that mean concerning the love that we were just speaking about? This means through the Ava with all your might. That's beyond reason and understanding. Comes about the drawing down of Hashem's essence. That's beyond Seder Ishtalshlus. After all is said and done, it's talking about being a sign for the greatest possible level, but it's only a simon, it's only a sign. In comparison to the infinite level of above, the avoid of the neshama is limited. In other words, we know in general, b'chol ma'odecha goes, like we say, toiv ma'od, very good. Very good indicates without limitation. Chassidus always talks about the additional word ma'od means without limitation. So b'chol ma'odcha means an ava without limitations. So if you're serving Hashem without limitations, how could it be, and how can you say, but Hashem is beyond that, it's unlimited? So we're saying no. There is, in comparison to the unlimited aspect of above, the person's service is called limited. How can you say such a thing? Either something is unlimited or it's limited. How can it be both things together? It says, a proof for this, that something can be unlimited on one level, but compared to a higher level, it can be limited. So he says, a proof for this is, even compare it to another, that is greater in his comprehension than the person himself. What's considered by the person something that is without boundary, without limitations, in comparison to someone else, an avodah that's limited. In other words, when we're talking about the level of a person being serving Hashem in a way of beyond barriers. So every person has their own limitations. And when they break out of their limitations, so they have gone out of their barriers. But what's for outside of their limitations might not be outside of someone else's limitations. For example, someone that has a greater understanding of godliness, he doesn't go out of his box, to use an expression, when he hears something about the Eibishter that someone else would go crazy about. One person learns a topic about the Eibishter, or discovers something about the Eibishter, or understands something about the Eibishter, and it blows his mind. And that blowing of his mind results in an ava and a love that's also a mind-blowing experience in a way of infinite going out of boundaries, and he cannot contain himself, and he's not limiting himself in any way because his mind is blown. Comes another person who is maybe more broad-minded, more has an intellectual bent, is more familiar with this topic, and when he hears it, it's interesting and exciting, etc., but it doesn't cause him to totally blow his mind, and therefore it doesn't cause him that when his service and his love comes about to be also in a relatively organized, limited, rational fashion. So if we find that even one person's bligvul might be considered mugbal or limited concerning someone else, how much more so when a person goes out of his limitations, but it's still only a simon, it's insignificant in comparison to the infinite aspect of Hashem. Therefore, also the avoid of the neshama, it's not a level of bligvul. Hirak siman belvad al atzmus is only a sign for Hashem's essence. And through this avodah, that the person does the level of Re'usa Deliba, he draws down Hashem's essence, because the etzem of the Yid is connected and brings about the etzem of Hashem, and that by going out of his own limitations as much as he can, even though it's a simon, it's only insignificant, Gab Hashem's infinite, it still touches the level of atzmus. That's the level of ציון that we're referring to over here. ציון b'mishpat tefda, the essence of the neshama shebechinas yichida. And then the Rebbe says, even though in a specific way ציון goes on yichida, b'chlolus yoser bechinas chaya yichida. In a more general way, ציון doesn't just go on yichida, but it goes on the two levels of makifim of the neshama chaya yichida. Since it's makif, that all is connected with the level of ציון. The difference between nefesh, ruach, and neshama, which those are the koiches pnimium, usually associated with actions, with intellect, with emotions. So the main difference between these two sections versus chay yechida, which is ציון, which is the makifim, shebechinas naran efsher sheyislapshu gam belumazeh, the levels of nefesh, ruach, neshama, it's possible for them to become enclosed also on the opposite side, also in klippa. When it comes to the Chai Yechida, since they are transcendent, they cannot be captured and embedded into klippas. Very interesting point. Mesiras Nefesh is associated with Yechida. Again, in a more general way, you could say it's associated with Chai Yechida. A person's mind can become captured by klippas. A person's emotions, for sure, a person's thought, speech, and deed, that's naran. But to say that the person's self-sacrifice, that a person will be willing to totally give up their lives for something in klippa, that's not shaykh, because Chai Yechida Vayid cannot become enclosed in L'umazeh. The reason behind this is Bebuah of the Bebuah last level. Chassidus always plays off of this Gemara that it says that the Shindala doesn't have a shadow of a shadow. Shadow of a shadow shows on the highest levels of makif. The Gemara speaks over there about a person being able to tell if he's bumping into Shindalad in those days when Shindalads were easily available on the road, etc. So Chassidus explains that Klippa does not have the levels of the Etzem, and therefore they cannot grab and they cannot enclose a Yid's Etzem. Only the things that they have comparable to it, let's say the intellect, so they can grab hold of our Nefesh Elokis's intellect, etc. And only the level of Nefesh Ruach Neshama, after she slaps it's possible for them to become enclosed in Klippa. Hein bechinas nehi, hein bechinas chagas. Whether we're talking about the levels of Netzach Yisoid of Neshama, and even the Chesed Gvura Tiferes of Neshama, and even higher, v'gam bechinas the Chabad, top of page 236. Also that level, the level of Chacham bin Adas, they can also grab hold of because they have a counter level like it. Like it says in the pasuk, Chachamim heimel lahara, that they are wise to do evil. So we see this idea that there is Chachma even in Klippa, but that's as far as it goes. It only Naran, not higher than that. Similar to what Alter Rebbe writes in Tanya, that through external wisdoms, through learning secular knowledge, one makes causes impurity to reach the Chabad of the Nefesh, because the Chabad of the Klippa now enclosed the Chacham bin Adas of the Nefesh. So now, based on this, we can understand why it says over here about ציון and versus ושבי. ציון במשפט תפדה, ושבי בצדקה. So he says, וזהו מה שכתוב ציון גיימר ושביה. What does it mean, ושביה? ושביה kai al bechinas naran. Shaveh can either be returnees or captives. So the Shaveh part of the pasuk, v'shaveh b'tzedakah, is referring to Nefesh Ruach Neshama. She'after sheyu b'shivya b'lumazah. The Nefesh Ruach Neshama, it's possible that they could be in captivity in the side of Klippa. Aval b'chinas ציון, but the level of ציון, she etzma neshama shalamayim metam v'das. That's the essence of neshama. That's beyond rational understandings, the super rational connection with Hashem. It's impossible for that to be in captivity. When it comes to the etzem neshama, there can only be a state of concealment. It's impossible that it can become enclosed on the opposite side in klippas. Since it can be concealed, we have to affect in it a level of revelation. So that's the ציון במשפט תפדה, the ציון that has to be redeemed. So the way the Rebbe explains over here, based on the Alter Rebbe, is that the redemption is just that it has to be revealed from its concealment. The ציון cannot be a captive, it can only be concealed. The Chai Yechida can be concealed. But Pashtas, we don't have the Koyach HaMesiris Nefesh the whole time bubbling within us, because if so, then, like we learned in Tanya, we would never do any Aveda. But we have to bring it out, we have to reveal it. Then there's the captives, that has to be taken out of L'umazet, that is done through Tzedakah, as we will go on. So he says in the second paragraph, on page 236, concerning this it says that ציון you redeem with Mishpat, V'shaveha and its captives are taken out with Tzedakah. Shekadei live to be able to affect the level of the revelation of ציון, which is concealed, like we said before. How do we make it revealed? Is through Mishpat. To be able to affect the redemption from the opposite side, from the Klippa. How do you extract the Nefesh Ruach Neshama from Klippa, who b'tzedakah is through tzedakah? The idea behind this is the mishpat koy ala Torah. What is mishpat referring to? It's going on Torah. Like it says, kamishpat, says kamishpat harishon. So the v'tirgem kihilchasa kadmaisa, like the original halacha. So we see that the translation of mishpat is halacha. Showing in halachas ha-Torah, it's referring to the halachas of Torah. That's not the simple meaning of the pasuk over there, but we see that association. So mishpat goes on Torah. B'tzedakah, kipshuta in tzedakah, in its simple sense, hainu lahachis ruchanim, is to enliven the life and to breathe in life into the poor people. Ubechlolus, who inyan ma'isa mitzvahs in general, tzedakah is to the actions of the mitzvahs. Hefresh b'neim, who the difference between Torah versus mitzvahs, shat Torah, he belavusha machshava v'gam belavusha dibur. Torah uses the garment of thought and also the garment of speech. That's where we find Torah. It didn't descend to become clothed in the garment of action. This means Torah is an inner hamshacha that was not enclosed in the garment of action. Because it is so aloof, so transcendent, it doesn't deal with the world of action, therefore its effect and its transformation or revelation is in the level of ציון, which is not descendant klippus. It's the level of the Chai Yechida, the level that's only concealed. Tzedakah in the slapshivel v'shamayis, tzedakah was enclosed in the garment of action. Therefore, to be able to affect the level of nefesh, ruach, neshama that were enclosed in the opposite level in klippim, that comes about through tzedakah. The idea is through giving life to the spirit of poor people. So then his own naran, his own nefesh, ruach, neshama is also given a new life. You supplied life to the poor, so your life of your neshama becomes enlivened. The Tzemach Tzedek also explains something very interesting about mishpat, that for a court case to take place, you need to have three people. As opposed to a rav that has to paskin if something is kosher or not, you don't need three. You only need one. But when you come to a court case, you have two people arguing, then you need a bezin of three. When it comes to a court case, one is held as being the winner, and one is chas v'sholom the other. When it comes to saying if something is kosher, so there's only one line. Kosher, hebich kosher. You're just saying, is it kosher, is it not kosher? Toyer, hebich toyer. Is it toyer the opposite of toyer? Therefore, even one person can say this. So, but when you have to say this person is like that and that person is like that, these are two extremes and two opposites. In Kain's and Nimchak Gvura. This person being right, this person being wrong, so that's chesed on one side and Gvura on the other side. And we know always to be able to join two opposites, so that both chesed and Gvura to become joined. Al derech Nagu for it says that the Eibishter at the same time saved the Yidden and smote the Egyptians. So to be able to join both of these opposites together, al kein tzarech aidei teferes hamachaber chesed gvura. It has to be through teferes that joins chesed gvura. So that's why you need to have three judges to symbolize the number three that needs to be able to join the two opposites. And the significance of the third is very high. Ubechinas teferes oila, the keser, the level teferes rises all the way up to keser umamshach misham she's chabru chesed gvura, and it draws down from there that chesed gvura should become joined. The Tzemach Tzedek explains that a mishpat is a very high level. And because it's so high, it could deal with the tzia the very high level of the neshama. V'lachein tzia b'mishpat tipada. The key machine in a mishpat uvekavem tzorish magil amayla b'yoser. Since the idea of the mishpat is in the middle line, that reaches very high, harezim magil b'etzma neshama l'vdai, so therefore it reaches the esler, the soul, to redeem it. Ois hey, val pisa yuvana inyan shugamba gimel de porenusa. This is now understood why also in the three haftoidas that deal with rebuke and punishment, Kol Gam Shabbos Chazon, Shabbos Shekoyim Tisha B'Av, including Shabbos Chazon, which is, if you will, the height of the three of rebuke, the Shabbos before Tisha B'Av. Mesayim Haftoida of Sukkim Nechemta, we finish the Haftoida in Sukkim of comfort, Tziyim B'Mishpat Tipada, etc. Last page, Shasiyum Hu'atoichin Shakol Ha'inyan, the conclusion sums up the entire matter. Like in a document, the last line really sums up and is the content of the entire document. The general haftoid of Chazoin is idea of exile. Still in all, it's included in it. And even more so, the content in it is a matter of redemption. It has an intermingling of both lines. That's why it's geula, because it's able to straddle both ideas. So too it's also in Shabbos Chazon that the content of the haftoid is the final pasuk. B'mishpat Tefda, ושבי, בצדקה, שהוא עניין איסקלוס בייז הקווים. It's the idea of joining both lines. Idea הקו הגימל של הmayla משניהם canal through the third line that's higher than both. The kavza poil gamba agolus, and this kav, this line also affects in the golus. Yetziyim b'mishpat tipada ושבי, בצדקה, which should actually be fulfilled. Shetia agula hashlema b'mheira menu, it should be the true and complete redemption immediately.